welcome to Keeping It Real Estate with Kristen. I'm Kristen Goyette with Motto Mortgage, and as you know, this podcast is about all things real estate. And today we're going to dive into insurance claims. I have with me a very special guest. Not only is he a friend of mine, but he is a friend of my entire family. And this is Mr. Reid Rouse, and he is an insurance adjuster. He is the most handsome insurance adjuster in North Carolina. And that comment may or may not have been sponsored by Inkables, owned and operated by his wife, Chrissy Rouse. And also, Reid, I've got to say, I love your T-shirt.
Thank you very much.
And that was made by your wife at Inkables.
It was.
And it's a really fine shirt you have on there today. I didn't get the memo, or I wore mine as well.
It was a surprise.
I know you did surprise me. I appreciate that. All right, Reid, tell us all about yourself and your journey into the world of being an insurance adjuster.
Reid Rouse, live out of LaGrange, worked for 27 years as an insurance adjuster. Wow. Kind of hard to believe, to be honest with you. I started out with a company called American Modern Insurance Group. I worked for them for 10 years. Doing predominantly mobile home insurance claims. That's kind of where I cut my teeth. Left them, went to Foremost Insurance, which is owned by Farmers. Still work for them. They kind of merged in 1999, but kept their own identity for another 10 years. And so I've been working for Farmers / Foremost for 17 years. Still work mobile home claims, but then transitioned into more large loss houses, larger properties. I've been doing that for 5 years now. So officially my title is General Adjuster, and it's basically just means you're a large loss property adjuster.
Awesome. Very interesting.
Yeah, I do houses probably from down mobile homes all the way up to $1 million plus houses. So I kind of do the gamut now. It depends on what the loss is, but anything over $50,000 at this point, I handle regardless of what the cause of loss was. It could be water, it could be fire, it could be windstorm, any of the larger causes of loss.
Interesting. And now you travel with your work, so what's your service area?
Based out of North Carolina, I do all claims in North Carolina and Southern Virginia. So I could go from the Tidewater, Virginia, all the way through to the mountainside. I have gone and driven north into Maryland. I've done claims as far north as Connecticut, driven down and worked claims in Florida, and as far west as into Texas, Dallas, Houston area. Okay. And I've even gone up as far north in the Midwest and worked claims in Wisconsin and in Minnesota.
Okay. So in 27 years of this ball game, what's been your strategy to building up your business?
I've always worked just for one company, but I try to build myself. The strategy for building myself as an adjuster is just hard work, try to be as 100% honest as I can be, give everything I can get out of a policy to a customer and insured. As an adjuster, we are bound by the policy that the insured pays for, right? And so our coverage, what we pay for, we're paying for directly out of what that policy says. So it's a situation where I've always tried to squeeze as much out of a policy as I can for an insured. They pay for the policy. They deserve what they can get out of it.
Right.
If there are items in a policy, and then we all know that there's exclusions in policies, but if I can find a way to cover it, that's what I'm paying for.
Wow. I feel like maybe you should have been an insurance agent with that transparency.
I actually thought about that at one point.
Who wouldn't love to have an agent that says, I'm going to get you everything I can out of this policy? Or maybe they are, but it just doesn't feel like it to us lay people.
Well, I think part of the problem is in the insurance world is you'll have insurers that have great claim experiences, and you have insurers that have what they feel like is very bad poor claim experiences. I think a lot of that has to do with coverage decisions. So there's going to be claims that are not going to be covered under a policy. There's going to be claims that are going to be covered, and there's going to be those in-betweens where you're going to have coverage and partial denials. And I think a lot of people have issues with denials, myself included, right? I don't like to deny claims. I don't like to partially deny things, but as an adjuster, a licensed adjuster in North Carolina, I'm bound by what the policy says. Right. I think part of where there can be some disconnect from between agents and adjusters is the agency side. I feel like if you were coming to me and I was an agent, and I kicked it around with Chrissy, my wife, is that, I think I'd be a really good agent after all these years because I would know what to say to a prospective insurer that when they came in to buy a policy, I would say, okay, this is the policy I would recommend, but this is what it's going to cover, this is what it's not and why. So these are some things you need to be aware of up front. This is how you need to maintain the house. These are the reasons why we need to maintain it. And if you do have a claim, these are some expectations that you're going to need to think about of why something is or is not covered.
Right. So in the mortgage world, you've got the real estate agent, the lender, me, and the underwriter. So are you the middleman as well? I'm trying to kind of wrap my brain around. Is it the agent, and then you're the claims adjuster, but then whatever you write up for somebody, whatever you assess, does somebody kind of have to approve that, or how does that work?
I've reached a level where there's very few other people approving.
Okay. He's a big dog.
I've reached a level as a large loss property adjuster where I have a larger authority to be able, monetary authority, to be able to say, okay, we're covering this. Now, I still have someone I answer to. I think everybody has someone they answer to, right? And so that would be a manager, somebody higher up in the company that if a claim escalated to that level, they want to make sure I'm doing the right thing, right? But monetarily, I haven't had a claim yet that I couldn't pay.
Oh, wow.
So
you're making all the decisions based off your experience and your assessment and the policy.
Up to my authority. And then after that, then I have to present that section of facts to a manager. And if it's over the manager's authority, to someone over him. And they would round table and go, okay, this is the game plan we're going to do to issue payment or cover or not cover based on whatever the facts are.
Okay.
But there's more than me as the middleman. There's contractors, vendors that work for or under farmers or any insurance company.
Right.
And those can be middlemans along with the agent. So
Gotcha.
There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to a larger insurance claim. It might not necessarily be there for one as kind of simple as maybe a simple wind claim to siding or roof. When you have a fire or some major water damage, there's a lot of players involved in an insurance claim.
Okay, I was just curious if anybody had to approve your stuff, like kind of.
Been very rare as of late.
Cool. That's really cool. So how many families did you serve last year?
I have, in 27 years, I've served tens of thousands of people. When I first started adjusting, I would do 3-4 claims a day, every day, during the work week. And that has continued up until the last 5 years. And then when I transferred over to what I would call the BCO level of claims, which is just everyday claims, could be a wide range of causes of loss, I've transitioned into the large loss property adjusting role. And so now I'm basically one a week. Somebody has a big claim, I can dedicate my time to that individual. Awesome. And so if we ever have a claim that a BCO adjuster gets and it needs to go to large loss property, one of my first things I tell an insured is, look, so-and-so handles a lot of claims in a short period of time. I have the ability to concentrate on your claim and give you the best service possible. And so I pride myself on that, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. One-on-one service is awesome.
Yep.
So let's see. I've got some new questions that I'm bringing to the podcast today. What would you say, because this is informative, we're trying to educate the audience, that's kind of the purpose behind the podcast, about all things real estate.
Sure.
So what are some common misconceptions, and you kind of alluded to it just a minute ago, that people have about the real estate, insurance adjusters or insurance industry
I think the biggest misconception is the insurance adjuster works for the company and he's trying to save the company money.
Right.
I get that every so often, even in large loss property. I get that. All you're trying to do is not pay my claim. That's a huge misconception. It's totally inaccurate. Mm-hmm. We're going to pay what the policy covers and the policy says. Mm-hmm. Now, in the insurance world, especially in North Carolina, the North Carolina Department of Insurance decides what is going to be on an insurance policy.
Gotcha.
So if Reid Rouse wanted to start an insurance company and have my own policy that covers things that another insurance company won't cover, the state's not going to allow that.
Gotcha.
The state's going to provide the guidelines and the policies. Anybody who has a policy in the state of North Carolina for a particular line of business or type of policy, could be landlord, could be RV, could be boat, could be mobile home, could be stick-built house, and there's many different policies through those types of business. Mm-hmm. The state's going to decide the parameters of that.
That's
one person's not going to be able to cover one thing that another can't.
That's
another
good.
wants to, rather.
That's interesting.
Yep.
And so how can homeowners best prepare for natural disasters or other unexpected events from your perspective?
To be honest, even not only just natural disasters, but with regular day-to-day claims, maintenance is the key to everything.
Gotcha.
If you've got an older roof on a mobile home or on a house, depending on the pitch of that roof, all those factors kind of decide how a claim is going to be affected. So, like, if you have an older roof on a house, it's more susceptible to wind damage and hail damage than a newer roof.
Right.
I would say maintenance is the number one key. Mm-hmm. Roof leaks occur due to lack of maintenance or poor maintenance. Mm-hmm. Maintaining around vents. If you have any shingles that need to be replaced, that haven't been replaced, that are torn, replace those shingles. Right. Individual shingles, and I know that's kind of been a hot topic in our industry, individual shingles can be replaced. Everyone wants a new roof when it comes time if you have wind damage. But if it's not a lot of damage, individual repairs can take place. I think when you're dealing with leaks around roofs, leaks around windows, having it sealed, caulked properly, maintaining that. Any rotten wood on fascia, soffits, or around windows, replacing that makes all the difference in the world. Because if you have poor maintenance or old rotten wood that you're not replacing, that you're just going, I'll do it at another time. Over time, water leaks inside the wall systems or inside the roof system, and that causes long-term water damage and rot, and that's typically not covered under an insurance policy. Allowing individual plumbing leaks inside, making sure that's stopped when you can, drying out wood if it has leaked, those kind of things prevent long-term water damage that, to be honest with you, gets very expensive.
Right. So when I was in HR or supervising a bunch of people, like I would just always say, one of my advice or whatever, I would say it's easier to put out a match than it is a forest fire. So in other words, bring me your problem when it's small, not when it's progressed. And so that's kind of what you're saying. Fix these little things, do this maintenance that's aggravating on the front end, but it saves you so much effort and aggravation and time and money on the back end.
Without question, and I think that's part of the insurance where people have a bad taste in their mouth when they deal with denials or partial denials in an insurance claim. Wear and tear is not covered on an insurance policy.
Right.
So if you have a roof that's 30 years old and it's 25-year shingles, we're really past the life expectancy. Do they still perform the function? Absolutely. But that's a wear and tear item. I liken it to tires on a car. At some point, the tire has reached there's no more tread. Right. It has to be replaced. That's not something that's covered on an insurance policy. Now, wind damage where it starts tearing shingles up, hail where it damages the shingle, absolutely, that's a covered loss. But you also have to understand that part of that claim is some of it wear and tear, is some of it I call direct, sudden, and accidental damage.
Gotcha.
And there's differences in the policy on what it's covering and how it's going to cover it. So there's not only can individual shingles be replaced, but sometimes the entire roof has to be replaced.
Right.
Sometimes it's front slopes, sometimes it's back slopes, or sometimes it's partial repairs. And that all depends on each individual. It's a case-by-case basis.
Right.
So I've had people that I've replaced roofs on, and the next door neighbor, their insurance company didn't replace the roof, or vice versa. Claims are an individual thing.
Right.
That different factors determine why an adjuster's paying what they're paying. Now, there's also some times where an adjuster might not make the correct call on whether to repair or replace. And that's something that needs to be discussed with the contractor and the adjuster to come up with the best course of action.
Right.
You know, sometimes, a lot of times at Farmers and a lot of insurance companies will use a third-party vendor to determine roof damage. Mm-hmm. Somebody that has an unbiased opinion that goes, and especially during wind and hail, they'll go on the roof, inspect the entire roof, mark hail hits, mark wind damage, and then that aids the adjuster. It doesn't mean that we follow their recommendation to the letter.
Right.
All these vendors are tools, right?
Exactly.
And so it's just a tool to make a coverage decision.
Right. So with all that, let's say, you know, my roof's messed up and you come out and assess it and you've told me whatever and I'm not satisfied with that. Mm-hmm. What does the policy holder, what's their steps if they did, because like you just said, one insurance adjuster is going to say this and one's going to say
Sure.
that. So if you aren't satisfied and you feel like this particular person they're just not satisfied, what do they do?
I think the best thing to do would be get the insured and the contractor to have a conversation with the insured and the agent, right?
Gotcha.
We need to have a dialogue. Why is the contractor saying one thing and the adjuster saying another? I think if you come together and you agree on the scope of repairs, on what's reasonable, right?
Right.
If you agree on the scope, then the pricing will take care of itself, right?
Right.
The pricing is not going to be uniform across the board. One person's roof, you're not going to be able to price that the same as another.
Right.
There's all kind of different factors involved in that, right? Mm-hmm. Shingle components, slope size, pitch. There's all kind of things. 1-story, 2-story, 3-story, right?
Right.
That have a factor in that. But I think dialogue and agreeing on the scope of damage takes care of everything. I think if you go in and go, he didn't pay for my roof, and the insured is stonewalled, it's the same as the adjuster going, I'm not paying for the roof, and he being stonewalled.
Right.
I think if we come together and have a conversation, we agree on the scope, we can get things covered.
Right, all that transparency and
That's
I mean,
right.
you know, I know you as a person, so I know how transparent and kind, and you're for everybody, even in your personal life. So
I'm the guy.
but everybody's not like that.
That's true.
So that's why I asked that question.
I am the guy in a fire that says, I want you to put all your things in your junk drawer in your kitchen on your contents list. I want you to, you've got toothbrushes, put them on the list.
Right.
If you pay for a policy and a loss is covered, you need to get every dime you can get out of the policy.
Right.
You pay for that, right? It's insurance for your loss. And if it's a covered loss, we need to get everything we can get out of it.
Right. I loved your motto that you're going to squeeze everything you can out of that
Squeeze everything
policy.
I can
That's
out
awesome.
of it, right?
So walk us through the claims process and what property owners can expect when something does go wrong.
I think, to be honest with you, it all starts first with the agent-insured interaction.
Okay.
I think a lot of disconnect between insurance adjusters and how people view claims can instantly be rectified by an honest, upfront conversation from an agent.
Right.
I think if the agent and the insured get together on what their property is, what they're looking to insure, what the property is, how they're looking to cover it, because I might want something different on a rental property than another landlord might, right? Mm-hmm. Some people want replacement costs. Some people want actual cash value, right? And a lot of that is driven by how many properties, how much money someone has to spend on insurance, you know, over the course of a year. There's a lot of things that play into that.
Right.
But I think if the insured and agent has a honest conversation, this policy covers this, it won't cover that. And then when that person has a claim, they understand up front, okay, look, I've got this. I know that's probably not covered, but I'm going to try to file a claim. Or from my conversation with my agent, this should be covered. I want to file the claim, right? And it might be over a dollar threshold that they go, well, it's only X amount over my deductible. Should I file it? Should I not? I think the claims process starts with that. And then once it gets to me, at that point, I'm trying to build trust with the insured. I deal with larger claims, more catastrophic claims where people are displaced. And so I need that individual, just like you trust me, I need that individual to trust Reid. And so even when I was doing BCO claims, I would spend a tremendous amount of time with an insured just speaking with them in their house, right? It could be something as simple as a toilet overflow, but I want to sit down and have a conversation, right? I want to look at something like if Zach has wood duck things. I want to have a conversation about wood ducks, right?
Right.
I want you to feel comfortable. I'm just not here for the claim. I'm here to discuss.
Building relationships.
I want to build a relationship with you, right? Because I want you to be able to go, hey, Reid, look, I've got another claim. Talk to me about it. Because I've had that multiple times over my career. What do you think about this? And I'll go, well, based on what you're telling me, yeah, I think you should file a claim, or I need some more information. Let's talk about it. Right. I want somebody to be able to feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. I don't know because Keith handles everything, but I know that we've had one insurance claim because we came home from dinner one night and my ceiling was like sagging, like it was holding water.
Okay, like the paint was feeling like it was pregnant?
Yes, pregnant, but I don't know if it was just, I think Keith like went to touch it and like the ceiling fell.
We've had the exact same thing happen actually.
Super smooth process.
Sure.
Unfortunately, you weren't my insurance adjuster guy, and I don't even know who it was because Keith handled it. But I mean, this is so interesting. You're such a stand-up guy, and you're so transparent, and I love how you're building relationships, which is what my industry is all about.
Right.
So, how have things changed in 27 years? Which I know you've moved up the chain too, but like overall, from the high level, how have things
I feel like I started
changed?
in the Stone Ages, to be honest with you. It's been crazy. When I first started adjusting, it was Polaroid cameras.
Oh, wow.
It was tape recording conversations, and the tape recordings, they had cassette tape cartridges that you could put in a blank cassette tape, and then you would keep those, put them in a little bag, and you could write the claim number and the name on it and the date, and you kept those. And so when I first started adjusting, it was Polaroid cameras that you glue stick to photo sheets.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Then when I'd go to your house to adjust that loss, I would on a piece of paper with triplicate, I would write the report, the estimate, all that on the same page. I would tear one off, clip it to the photographs, and I'd keep those at the end of the week. At the end of the week, I'd send those to the company. And I would give a copy to the insured, not the photos, but the estimate and the settlement report. And then I would keep a copy in a what do you call it? I can't even think now. It's been so long. A filing cabinet.
Oh,
I don't even use filing cabinet anymore.
File, but okay.
So that transition to, then we went, and I had a fax machine, so I'd get claims on a fax. Then it transitioned to pagers.
Okay.
That transitioned to the bag cell phone.
Oh my goodness.
And when the bag cell phone came, digital cameras. And so then digital cameras, cell phones, and now computers. So I remember American Modern made their own adjusting program. It was super simple, but it's a little bit faster than writing it down, right? You had some pricing that you weren't coming off the top of your head then, right? It was, you had like a database.
Right.
And then from that, it morphed into national software companies. Right now we use Xactimate, which is actually a fantastic tool. A lot of vendors and contractors use Xactimate. They actually go zip code by zip code or areas or blocks of zip code, and every month they adjust the pricing.
Oh, wow.
And so they don't have every line item, right, but they have the vast majority of line items you would need to adjust a claim.
Right.
And then obviously, depending on the area where you're at, the contractor may do, cost plus labor. People do it different ways, but you can still come to a number, right? All you're trying to do is agree on the scope, and the estimating platform and the contractor, the numbers most of the time will come out close. You have to do negotiations like you do anything else, right?
Right.
But the bottom line is you're trying to help out the insured. You're not
Right.
doing anything other than that.
So how do you determine the value of a property in the event of a disaster or episode?
So I'll tell you the story. So when I went from the BCO claim to large loss property, when I was getting hired for that, I was getting interviewed, and the two managers asked me, what would you do in $1 million loss? How would you adjust that? And my response to him was, it's just line items. So I still approach every single claim to that. Okay. So whether it's a single-wide mobile home at the beach or it's a $2 million house at the beach, I don't care. It's just line items. So I'm going to go in that house. I'm going to approach the problem the same way. I'm going to meet the insured. I'm going to take pictures. I'm going to find out what they think about their house. They know their house better than Reid Rouse ever will.
Right.
They know what they painted, when they painted. They know what trim they put in. They know exactly what kind of flooring they did, right? They know what kind of fixtures, plumbing or light fixtures. They know when they bought it, right? I want to make sure that when I scope that house, I take all that into consideration and I make scope notes for that. And then I go in, I take all my pictures. I probably take 200 or 300 pictures of loss. I'll estimate a lot off of the photos and the conversation. Sometimes I take video. And then I go back and I put it on the estimating program and I draw out the house and I start in each room. And I just go each room and I'll start ceilings, walls, flooring, windows, doors, cabinetry, plumbing. So every single room has those headings and I just put everything that needs to be done. So in your house where you had the bubble in the ceiling, we're going to start what needs to be done in the ceiling, right? We've got to take the whole ceiling out. What electrical items need to be taken out? Is there crown molding? Whatever's on the ceiling, right? I added those line items. So my approach is the same every claim. It's just line items. What's damaged? How do we replace it or fix it?
Right.
And at the end of it, it's going to come out a number.
Right.
And whether that number is high or low, it depends on what kind of damage it is.
Okay. So what advice would you give to real estate investors who are looking for the right insurance coverage?
I think the company doesn't necessarily make the difference, but the agent makes the difference. Okay. So my advice to somebody who's going to buy property is to find out where you're going to buy, what kind of area is that? Is that a constantly wet area? Do we have to be worried about moisture underneath the house that can lead to surface mold, right? What are we going to do about that? Is that covered under the policy? Some policies absolutely don't cover mold. Some policies have a mold coverage, right? Up to certain amounts. What does that entail? Does this property has asbestos on the inside or outside? If I have a loss, how is that going to affect the claim coverage, right? Will the policy cover it or not? And if so, how much? Right. I would want to know if I'm in a flood zone. If I'm in a potential flood zone, I'd want flood insurance, regardless of whether that house has ever flooded before or is not in a designated flood area on a flood map. If it's got the potential, I'd want coverage for that. Now, mobile home policies in the state of North Carolina, they automatically are covered for flood. This policy really is made after the automobile policy, right? The house is designed to go down the road from initial construction to where it's going to be placed. Gotcha, yeah. So that's covered under the policy. Regardless of whether you had brick skirting around it, as long as it's a mobile home policy, it would be covered for flood. But a stick-built house is not going to be covered for flood unless you buy that policy. And then there's limitations to that on how much that's going to be covered. So I'd probably, if I'm going to be in a high-wind area, what kind of roof do I have? Do I have an older shingled roof? Do I have a metal roof, right? I'd want to know the particulars of where I'm going to be and talk to my agent about what policies and or endorsements are available to better protect my property. Right. Just because it's an insurance policy doesn't mean it's covering all perils, right? It doesn't mean it's going to cover every loss. But I think the conversation with the agent can help you mentally prepare for something that is definitely covered or something that might have partial denials or something that might not be covered at all.
Right. So obviously before I'm having this conversation with you, or even in this industry, I feel like so many people, when it comes to buying insurance, it's like, just give me the basics.
Right.
And I think it's just from lack of understanding. So based on your experience, I mean, especially speaking about flood insurance, I mean, I don't think anybody gets flood insurance, or at least they used to not, because I remember when the flood came that it was a big deal. Mm-hmm. People were like, I wasn't prepared for that. So would you encourage people to do that, or only, I mean, based on how the claims that you're seeing, are people like stuck in a rut a lot because they don't have the coverage that they needed? Or are they pretty much, for the most part, covered, like maybe that partial denial deal? What have you seen?
I don't think the partial denial part plays a big factor in the particular type of policy. That's going to be, most of the time when you have a partial denial, it's going to be something that is happened in with that claim, or they find a certain amount of damage that might not be covered, and so that needs to be partially denied. It's not covered, it's an exclusion. Mm-hmm. I do think that people need to have a conversation with the agent, and it doesn't necessarily need to be about price. That obviously factors into everybody's day-to-day decisions, but there are so many endorsements and riders that you can have on a policy. One that comes to mind, replacement cost versus being actual cash value. That's huge. If you decided, and I've had this so many times, that you had a property that you go, you know what, I just don't want to pay for that replacement cost just because of how much that's going to add to my policy premiums a year. And then they have a big loss, and then they get shell-shocked when you've got to replace the roof, you've got to replace carpet, floor coverings depreciate terribly, right? Electronics depreciate 10% per year. And so if you have carpet or electronics that's 10 years old that looks brand new, it still depreciates, right? And if you have an actual cash value policy, you don't get that depreciation back.
Right.
So the purpose of the replacement cost endorsement is, once you replacement, that's recoverable. That's a big thing, especially if you have a very large loss. Paint, floor coverings, plumbing fixtures, anything like that that's going to take heavy depreciation hits, you want to be able to have that to be reimbursed.
Right.
I can't imagine having a $300,000 or $400,000 loss and maybe $100,000 of it you can't get back, right?
Right.
And that creates a problem down the line if you have a lien holder and you've got to get things repaired. So I want to, as an insured, I want to be informed.
Right.
And that's where the agent comes in. And then when they have a claim, it's up to me to be able to explain the coverage or possibly lack thereof in the whys, right?
And squeeze that policy and get all their benefits out of it.
If it's covered, it's the insurance company and adjuster's responsibility to pay the insured as much as the policy will allow, right?
Right.
If it's covered, it needs to be paid.
This is just such a great conversation. I didn't even realize electronics and whatever the things that we buy depreciate. I was just thinking all things. I wasn't thinking about electronics, but the house itself is just appreciate. But that's not really the case.
Well, you think of house values appreciating, right?
Yeah.
You buy it here, you sell it there, and there's ups and downs in the market, right? We understand that, but that's where the education of insurance really comes in. You don't want an agent that is just out to sell a policy. You're going to have a bad experience. You want an agent that, just like an adjuster, I want you to trust me when I come in the house. That trust is a hard thing to get, right? Just because of they may have had a denial in the past and now they've got a claim that really is totally covered, and I want to build that relationship with them. It's tough on that, especially if they haven't built a good relationship with their agent.
Right.
A great agent means all the difference in the world. So
Absolutely.
I think insurance starts with the agency, not necessarily the company, but with the relationship with the agent, and that carries on to the insurance claim.
So can you give us an example of maybe an insurance claim or I can lose my train of thought. Anyway, an episode. I keep calling them episodes of a transaction that was meaningful or interesting to you. You could go either way.
I think the insurance world in 27 years, I've had some interesting claims. I think that's the best way to describe it. I've gone all over the United States seeing claims.
Right.
I've seen houses that were totally destroyed. I've seen, and when you have a devastating loss like that, you not only have to be able to deal with the house, right, and their contents and their adjacent structures.
Right.
That's the insurance side of it. But you're also dealing with an insured who's lost everything they've got, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to be able to negotiate that. And sometimes you have to, that's very rewarding to me, right? I pride myself on claim surveys. Superior Service Awards. I get those a lot. Last 3 years, I've never had a survey that came in less than all 10s.
And I have no doubt.
And I pride myself in that, to be honest with you. I want to be that guy. Right? I want to be the customer guy.
Right.
And sometimes, if I try to teach somebody about going out, you shadow me, I'll spend a tremendous amount of time with insurers. We kind of talked about that, right?
Right.
I want to build that relationship.
Right.
I want them to trust Reid. I want them to speak highly of Farmers and Foremost Insurance, right?
Wow.
Where somebody goes, well, I had a bad experience. Well, Reid's the best. That's
right.
what I want, right?
That's awesome.
And because I think that speaks positively on me and Farmers Insurance. I have had claims that sometimes they go off the rails, and it doesn't have anything to do with me or the agent or the company, right? Sometimes you have insurers that sometimes can be difficult or have expectations that you can't live up to, right?
Right.
And sometimes you have claims where they go through contractor and contractor and contractor, and that makes the claim process very challenging, especially if you have that and low limits, or you have the lack of replacement cost, and all these factors play in, and you've got to negotiate that. Sometimes it can be a claims minefield, right? And we just got to do the best we can. I'm not the general contractor, but I'm here to keep that claim between the ditches, right? At the end of the day, it's my job in a covered loss and my role to get the insured back in that house where they're satisfied and they can go, you know what, that was an awful experience that happened to my house, but at the end of the day, Reid got me to the finish
So do you
line.
oversee the entire project?
I oversee that from the start till they get back in their house.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Part of my thought process in handling a claim is constant communication.
Right.
So when I issue a payment, that's not the last time you hear from me. And I'll even tell them up front, like I issued a payment on a house today. I'll call you in 7 days. Make sure you got the check, or if you have any follow-up questions. After that, I'll call you in 30 days to check on the repair process. If I've totaled a house out, I'll call you in 30 days to see if you got any questions and to see if decision you made about repair versus demolition, right? And sometimes just because I issue policy limits doesn't mean the house can't be repaired, right? I paid everything that you paid for in your policy. Right. And that can create challenges, right? So claims are different. Every single one of them. None of them go exactly the same, but I approach them the same.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, how do you stay up to date on the changes in your industry?
We do continuing education. North Carolina adjusters 24 hours every 2 years. I do a lot of continuing education classes. I try to do different classes every year that focus on a little different situation. Could be, every year in North Carolina you got to do ethics and flood, right? Got to keep up to date on that. But it could be hoarding. It could be lightning with HVAC. A lot of times you could have something where you have a power surge or a lightning strike on a unit, and the whole unit doesn't have to be replaced. It could be a control board. It could be a capacitor. Something that could be as simple as, a $15, $20 part could repair something that could potentially cost $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, right, or more. So I keep up to date on that. I just keep up to date on vendors. We use vendors a lot. ServiceMaster, ServPro. There's a lot of different water mitigation vendors out there.
Gotcha.
Contractors, obviously, there's roofing, flooring. It's all kind of different contractors that specialize in their field. I try to keep up with that, right? And I do that through continuing education online, going to classes, meet and greets. I try to keep up with those type of people that can give me information. Go, hey, this is coming down the line. If you start seeing this, you need to be aware of it.
Right.
So I keep an open mind to everything.
So do you have to have a license or a certification for what you do?
Yes.
Okay, so you're required to have so many?
From the state of North
Fees?
Carolina. 24 credit hours every 2 years. And there's certain ones that the state requires that you have to do every 2 years. And the other ones you could just, it's just gathering knowledge.
Right.
There's AIC, which is a designation that requires some coursework. CPCU is the big one in the insurance industry. It's difficult to get. I don't have that designation, something that adjusters want to work towards. But just educating yourself and keeping abreast of the technology that's coming out. There's a company or a few companies now that work on mold mitigation. Gotcha. They can actually go into a house, kill the mold, and the mold won't grow anymore, right? It's something that you don't have to be aware of. That's an extra service. If the policy covers that, that's a great service to do. But the technology is evolving with smoke encapsulation, mold growth, and the destruction of that, and mold mitigation and fire mitigation as a whole. That's constantly evolving. Right.
So we need more than Clorox for mold.
Need more than Clorox. Mold mitigation is not Clorox. I can assure you that.
All right. So what are some of the biggest risks that property owners should be aware of to insure against, in your opinion?
I would say areas of where you're buying property, moisture content at the beach, swampier areas or around rivers and streams that rise and cause a lot of moisture. The beach, you got hurricanes. When you got hurricanes, you got hurricane, windstorm deductibles, which because of where they are, it's an increased risk for the insurer, right? And so they're going to increase your deductible for that. Like we talked about before, flood coverage. If I was in the mountains, I want to make sure that my heating system was proper. Maybe the possibility of generator for heat, right? Frozen pipe claims are huge in the wintertime. I want to make sure that if I was in an area if I was building a house in a tornado alley, I'd want to make sure I had the right coverage, right? In California, you want to make sure that you're covered for wildfires, right? That you want to make sure if I was buying a property, I take all those factors in consideration. I talk to my agent. I want to make sure I wasn't underinsured, right? I was properly insured for the replacement of that house. I know there's some partial losses that you won't have to worry about policy limits, but if my house if it did catastrophic damage, I'd want to make sure I had enough coverage. Contents, adjacent structure, dwelling, inward contents, a lot of things that people don't think about is gun and jewelry collections. You can actually get riders on that would cover that above and beyond a smaller policy limit. Right. And so those are conversations you need to have, right?
That is interesting.
I've got this jewelry or this gun collection or this art collection or collectibles, could be sports cards, could be anything. I want to make sure that's covered because most of the time an insurance policy has very limited coverage on those items. And you want to make sure that if you have those collections that are increased value, you want to make sure that's covered.
Right, yeah, because people probably aren't thinking about that when they're going to get their homeowner's insurance.
That's exactly
or whatever.
right. Those are things to consider. And I think that's where the agent comes in, right?
Absolutely.
The agent, we have, everybody's got their best, right? I want to say we have the best agent there is, right? I feel comfortable with her after all these years of insurance, and we've had different agents. If we call her, there's nothing she won't get for us, Johnny on the spot, if we need it. Right. If she needs to have a hard conversation, which she just did 2 weeks ago about increased in insurance, right? Rates go up. Sometimes the rates go up because the insurance company is going, hey, we need a rate increase. We've got to have it, and the Department of Insurance decide what that increase is going to be, right? Right. And your rates are determined by all those factors we've talked about in this session, right? But I want to have an agent to have a rapport with me where when she tells me these are the reasons, I trust that, and then we can make a decision of do we need to go coverage, not leave her, but what are my coverage options if I really can't go up but so much more in my financial budget? Where can these exceptions be made? And if they are exceptions, am I willing to accept that risk if something happens?
Right. Well, I love that your agent called you to have that conversation.
Yep.
I didn't get a conversation. I got a bill in the mail. And it was like double. And I was like, what in the world? Something to think about.
Those is something to think about, right? Because I think I would be a great agent, right? Because of all the claims I've had and all the different claim scenarios, I would know what to say to an insured right out of the gate, right? I want to prepare them. If you've got this policy and you've got this type of house, these are some things I want you to be aware of. This has this type of flooring or this type of roof structure, this type of siding. They're susceptible to this type of water damage, right, or wind damage. We need to have that conversation so you can go, I've never heard that before. Yep. How do I best cover my house, and what do I need to do to keep? Nobody wants an insurance claim, right? Nobody really wants to have to go through that, but we need to be mentally and physically prepared to deal with that if that situation arises.
That's insurance in case blank happens, right?
That's
right. What Cat Williams did. So if you were not an insurance adjuster, what would you be doing?
An agent.
An agent?
Yeah,
well, you're definitely ready for that role, I can tell you that.
I think if I wasn't an insurance adjuster with a company, I would do independent work. I think I would like doing that, right? I've seen just about everything you can see in the insurance world, right? I'm familiar all the way up to commercial losses. I think I'd rather transition to be an agent.
Yeah, that you would definitely be awesome at that. So before we wrap up today, tell us something fun or interesting about yourself that I don't already know. I want to learn something new about Reid today.
Wow, I think you know a lot, right? I don't know.
Well, after how long we've been friends now?
My God.
The boys were in preschool.
I'm an outdoor guy, right? I like the outdoors. I like being at the beach. I like being at the mountains. I like to travel a little bit, right? I've been to Canada, Africa, France on mission trips.
Wow.
Most people might not have known that.
I didn't know that about the mission trip, I don't think.
Yeah, I've been to, everybody knows I've been a coach.
Yes,
I've
you
been
are.
baseball coach, football coach. I've been football coach from Little League through high school at North Lenore. Channing, my son now, we started a wrestling club in LaGrange. We're just trying to give something for kids. And I think if anybody needed to know anything about me, it was I want to help kids, right?
Right.
Kids need opportunities because kids grow into adults, and they need opportunities to learn a sport, which brings discipline, which brings work ethic, which makes you a successful adult, right? To me, money's not success. Being a productive citizen and helping others, that's my definition of success.
Right. So I know how much you love children, and so I was shocked at your answer about what else would you be doing. I thought you were going to be like teacher or professional coach or something.
I would like to coach too, but if I was going to stay in the insurance world, I would want to be an agent. Yeah. But if I had my ruthers, I probably want to be a coach. I'm good with kids.
You are.
And I feel like I'm a disciplinarian, but I'm also a loving guy, right?
Right.
I got a hard side and a sweet side, and I feel like the kids trust me. And I build a relationship with kids I coach, just like I build a relationship with insureds.
Awesome.
It's all about trust and relationship building.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for
Absolutely.
coming on today. This has been so interesting.
Thanks for having me.
Do you think we could come up with like maybe 10 or less questions that we could share with the audience, and questions they need to ask our insurance agent to be prepared and make sure they're covered for stuff?
I think what I would advise people is just go take a step back from what you own, what you want insured, how you want it insured. Have a list of your concerns and make time to talk with your agent and go, hey, just listen to a podcast. Reid was on there. He's got the best agent in the world, in his opinion. I want to sit down. I want to talk about my property, whether it's cars, boats, motorcycles, RVs, seasonal houses, landlord property, or the house I own, sit down and make a list of what are my benefits of my policy and what's my downfall and what best covers me. Regardless of the price at the moment, what best covers my property, and then let's tailor it to what I'm willing to pay.
That's what I was going to say. Figure out everything you want and then work backwards.
That's exactly
Back your way into what you can afford.
That's right. And what you're satisfied with on what your coverage versus what the cost is. I mean, it's just like anything else, right? There's going to be highs and lows, but with lows prices, there's the potential of less coverage versus the higher price, right? So I'm not trying to talk anyone into higher or lower. I'm just talking, you need to talk with your agent about what best suits you with the property you own.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Great conversation. Insurance agents, I'm sorry that you're going to get extra questions after this podcast. I love you all. I mean it. We're for the people. But anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'm Kristen Goyette with Motto Mortgage, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reid.
Thank you.
You're awesome.